You're listening to MMO Reporter, brought to you by Typefrag.com. Use the coupon code MMO Reporter for 25% off your first month's hosting. And also by Guild Launch. Slay more dragons with Guild Launch. Use the coupon code MMO Reporter for your first month's free paid subscription. Hello everyone, and welcome to MMO Reporter, episode 36. I'm Chris, and I am once again joined by... Wait, hold on. Something is wrong. There's no Bill here. I don't know what to do. Who's going to be witty with me? Who's going to have the witty and interesting banter that I usually have? Am I going to fly solo like our wonderful member podcast, Horde for Life? Nah, I think I'll just invite him over. Hi, Rich.
How you doing? You know, I big shoes to fill. So if you're looking for wit, I'll do my best. But Bill's a hard act to follow.
No, he's not. It's okay. You don't have to be nice. He's not here. So yes,
looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
It will be fun. We've got Rich Fisher here from Horde for Life and Defiant for Life and all sorts of awesome fun stuff that he does out on the internet. Before we get going too much, why don't you just talk a little bit about a few of the things that you do out there on the interwebs?
Well, you mentioned obviously Defiant for Life, which is on a bit of a hiatus. I got to tell you, I've had the itch, but I haven't had the time, so I haven't been into Rift as much as I would like. But certainly, Horde for Life, we've kind of upped our normal programming schedule, so we're at a full 4 times a month now. The listeners demanded it, and so we've done it. And we're also getting ready to launch the Chaos Stream, which is another podcast that we're putting together that's just more geek-related. It will cover gaming as well, but also branches out into other areas. So those are the main things that we're doing right now with the Ego Networks.
Awesome. Very, very nice. Sounds like fun.
It is fun. Podcast, as you well know, podcasting. Matter of fact, we had a discussion in the pre-show about how many shows you've done versus how many I've done, and you've really given me a bit of a complex tonight. My 17 or 18 shows do not compare to your 150 plus, so I bow to your expertise.
There's no expertise here. I just fake it every week, and every listener will tell
grind,
you just that.
Right?
That's right. No, you know what? But we're MMO gamers. We understand exactly what a grind is.
No question about it.
It is 150 episodes with the recording tonight. All of the different shows that the MMO Reporter Network puts out, it will be 150 shows total after this show. So I'm kind of excited. That's kind of cool. That's
a major accomplishment. So let me be the first in line to congratulate you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very excited. So enough about self-congratulatory talk. Let's get right into gaming, shall we? Rich, what have you been doing in MMO land this week?
Well, I'm probably doing the same thing that all 11.4 million other players are doing in the World of Warcraft, and that is obviously enjoying the 4.2 patch that was recently released. Haven't done much of the raiding yet, or really any of the raiding yet. Primarily enjoying all of the Fireland dailies. Anyone that's played WoW in the past, especially back in the Burning Crusade, might recall the Isle of Quel'Danas, the first really good set of dailies that WoW put together. The Firelands kind of gives me that Isle of Quel'Danas flavor. It feels a lot like that.
Oh, nice.
Obviously updated and more fire, more en fuego, if you will, because it is based around the Firelands. But a lot of fun and so much diversity. The one thing that 4.2 has added from a content perspective, it's catching some flack because there's some guilds that have already blown through some of the normal content, even raids. But those people are going to always going to complain. But as a whole, 4.2 is a pretty beefy patch, and I'm enjoying it, having fun with it.
That's really cool. Now, quick question for you. Bill and I had this discussion weeks ago, and I was of the opinion that it's not necessarily that the content is all that different now, but that the hardcore guilds that are in gaming now are not the same as they were. Ignore the whole size limitation. Let's just look at approach. The really hardcore raiding guilds are not what they were when MMOs started to have this whole raiding idea. So getting through the content so quickly is not only an idea of the content is scaled differently, it's built differently, but that people are looking to get this, world first, shard first of downing this boss, and they approach it in a way that is different than what they did 10 years ago. What do you think about that?
I think what you're finding, and I think this kind of hits on what you're saying, is that Blizzard has taken the approach, especially over the last 7 or 8 months, certainly with the launch of Cataclysm, of casting the widest net possible. And when you do that, you have hardcore players that have played since 2004 with the launch of the game. You have the hardcore guilds that are actually sponsored, like SK Gaming. You've got your Insidias, you've got your Paragons, and they have a very different approach than what we would consider the common or standard gamer. And I think what Blizzard has done, those people are going to complain. They're going to burn through the content. There's not a lot you can do about it. And given the way that the current game is and the tech that's available, honestly, there's not much that can be done about that. And so what you've got is a position where Blizzard has to literally kind of use a bell curve. And when they're looking at burning, how you burn through a content or how to scale the difficulty, and they say, here's the top 1%, the upper crust. We know what they're going to do. We really have to ignore them. We won't tell them that, but we have to kind of put them, out. They're not part of our plans. They're going to be here. They're going to burn through it. We can't really appease them. And then at the bottom end of the spectrum, you've got the other 1 or 2% that don't ever raid or certainly aren't successful at raiding. And those percentages might vary, but the point I'm making is that the bulk in the center, the bulk that's somewhere towards the middle, are the ones that are going to have other shades of gray and how well they do it, but they're not burning through Firelands in the first week. And I think that's where Blizzard has to focus their balancing efforts and really just kind of look at the two diametrically opposed extremes and say they're not part of the design plan. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it seems like Firelands is a good patch, some good content expansion. You seem to be happy with it.
I think it is a good. And the thing is, it took a long time to get here. The real problem I have, and it's one of the things that I ran into when I was covering this on Horde for Life, is we've been talking about 4.2 for at least a couple of months now. They've been releasing information. So 4.2 kind of was launched, and we were like, okay, well, I mean, I almost felt like I'd already played it because we had talked about it so much. There was really nothing. There was nothing new and exciting about 4.2 because we were so voracious in our wanting of this content. We were so bored in the last couple of months, and not unlike the end of Wrath, if you recall, as people were getting ready for 4.0.1. There was this palpable sense of just boredom, this malaise. And so what people would do is they would just, really gravitate and latch on and read and reread and talk about all the things that were coming down. And Blizzard was really forced to release that information as the only really thing they could do to kind of sate the populace.
Right.
But what that does is it creates a situation where you finally get it and you're like, yeah, okay, we finally got it. And it is a good patch. It has a lot of good info. It's got a lot of good gear. They spent a lot of time on it. But it doesn't have that same kind of, je ne sais quoi that you get in episodes or expansions past, where there was a lot of unknowns. Most of us know exactly what we were getting. We knew exactly where to go. We spent a ton of time on the PTR. These raids that are tearing through Firelands now, they did so because, with the exception of the final boss, they were able to basically hone their strats on the PTR. So this is not new for a lot of people. But for the bulk consumer, the average gamer, like me and like many others, perhaps like yourself, we're just kind of enjoying it. And as long as you can kind of go into it with, I'm not looking to burn through this, and I hate to use a cliched term like stop and smell the roses, but if you do approach it that way and you're not just trying to burn through it as quickly as possible with that kind of hell-bent attitude, then you can have a lot of fun. And you couple that with the fact that Arena Season 10 just launched, and there's a lot of new gear that's available for that. There's some new crafting recipes. There's a lot of things out there to keep you satisfied. The real question is, how long will it keep you satisfied? Some people are saying we're going to be right back where we were in just a couple of months. I don't know. Time will tell.
And sort of following up on that, how do you think Blizzard stacks up against some of the content delivery that's been happening in some other games? Lord of the Rings Online is one of those that, after a long drought after their free-to-play transition, have been putting out some pretty regular content in the form of skirmishes and instances, etc., as they build up to their expansion. And another one being, of course, Rift, which I've been playing a lot of lately, which has been putting out regular content, in the first few months after launch. Obviously, this was started before launch, but how do you think Blizzard compares to that?
I think right now they're behind the game, and which is ironic. I think it speaks a lot to the technology. Obviously, you're talking about a Warcraft game that launched in 2004, but started beta or alpha in 2000. The
Right.
code base is as old as 11 years. And when you're talking about tech that was built in 2000, 2001, you're
Yeah.
talking about some pretty archaic systems. You're talking about some spaghetti code. You're talking about having to basically brute force a lot of the coding that you're doing. As someone with a developer background, I can tell you that that is not an uncommon approach when you're dealing with older systems. And in the realm of development, and especially with MMOs, you're talking about an advancement that is accelerated greatly over a lot of other industries. A couple of years can mean all the difference in game systems, game mechanics, and development. And what we're finding is Rift. I can't speak to Lord of the Rings. I haven't played as much of that, but I am incredibly impressed with Tryon. They're putting out content, quality content at a faster pace, and they're doing it with what you know is far fewer developers. I mean, Blizzard has a legion of developers, and
Yeah.
like I said, they're having to throw a lot of people at the code. Rift certainly has some more elegant systems. I'll never forget listening to Scott Hartzman prior to the launch of Rift. I don't even remember where I heard this interview, but he had an interview, and one of the discussions he had talking about his technology, I think we may have even covered this in one of the earlier episodes, but we talked about the fact that their tech is so scaled to the point where they could literally, because of the way their systems are built, that they could take every person on a server, say there's 3,000 people on a server, and put them all on the same spot geographically
Yeah.
in the game world, and it would not affect their systems because the systems aren't scaled the way systems
Right.
were scaled
Yeah.
in 2000. That speaks volumes for the technology that Tryon has that Blizzard does not have right now. Now, I'm sure when Titan comes out, you're going to see even another jump forward in evolution, and we'll have another discussion on how impressive the Titan tech is. But right now, no matter how much money you've got, no matter how great the game is, you're talking about an 11-year-old engine, and it's very difficult to make things happen. And so you're seeing groups like Turbine with DDO and Lord of the Rings and Tryon with Rift able to not only keep pace, but in some cases outpace Blizzard with far fewer developers.
Right, but you also have to think with Titan that it's also going to be based on, even at this point, and it's not even launched yet, it's been in development for 4 years
Yeah,
already, right? So you're looking at 2007 tech, which
Yep.
is probably
And
when Rift started development as well. So you're looking at the
Exactly.
similar
Yeah.
technology, I bet.
Yeah, you have to keep that in mind that just because Rift launched in 2011, you're talking about, again, anytime a game launches, you're looking at tech that is at least 2, 3, 4 years old.
Right. Yeah. So that'll be interesting, and let's get off this side road that we've gone on, this awesome side road, but get back into things. Have you done anything else in WoW or played any other games in the past week?
Mainly been the World of Warcraft. Arena Season 10 is launched, so I've been looking into the arena sets. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the different tier sets that are available in Tier 12, which is also Arena Season 10. Very impressive. I'm actually pretty impressed with this set of gear. Obviously, just a lot of things to do in 4.2, and that's been taking the bulk of my time.
Awesome. Well, as for me, I've been playing quite a bit of Rift, trying to get Raid ready. It's quite a bit more of a challenge. It's a little bit harder, in my opinion, to get ready for raids gear-wise than it is in WoW. For more casual players, there's just a little bit more work that needs to be done, and you really, really have to run those instances. It's a little bit tougher to get through them than WoW, for example. So that's been taking up a lot of my time and my wife's time. I also got my Swift Najmok mount. For those of you that don't know, it is the armored gorilla mount. So I grinded my Order of Mathos rep enough, and man, that was crazy. Nice. That's probably the worst, notoriety. It's called notoriety, but rep grind that I've ever done in any game ever. I ended up just getting a group of players together and doing a mob through the area that this particular faction is in, and just we were killing mobs, elites in this area because we get more reputation for the elites, and so there were maybe 15 of us just going around killing stuff just to get, because that was faster than trying to do the dailies all the time. Yeah. Lord of the Rings Online has been my mainstay, of course, playing quite a bit of that. as we get closer and closer to the Rise of Isengard expansion, which I'm just so excited about. Spent a lot of last week also finishing up the article that I was writing that I can't tell anyone anything about for PC Gamer about Rise of Isengard. Got to do a run through of that a few weeks ago, so that's been keeping me very busy on the Lotro side. I tried EQ2. I had some time the other day, and I just decided to download it. And am I missing something? Because a lot of people speak really, really highly of it. And I went through a couple of the starter zones, and I don't want to say painful, but ouch.
No, I'll say it. It's painful. And if someone tells you that they're having a lot of fun in the game, you have to immediately follow that up with the question of how long have you played EQ2?
Yeah.
The people that are really ingrained in it have been playing the game for a number of years. And for someone that's an outsider that's played a game like WoW, or certainly a game like Rift, or certainly a game like Lotro that has such a very different appeal, it's a little more streamlined, certainly better looking. There's a lot of on paper value in EQ2, the housing component, the appearance tab, just a diverse amount of classes. But that game has not aged well. And if you had played it from the start, I can certainly see why you're still into it. But I did the same thing you did, only I did it 9 months ago, and I was like, I don't get it. I don't know how you could expect me to go from the World of Warcraft to this game.
Well, and I'm gonna give it a shot, a little bit more than my, I think, hour that I spent on it, because I think it deserves that. But excuse me, I remember when it came out, it being such a technological marvel, and it doesn't look as good as WoW. It came out reasonably similar timing. I think EQ was a little later, even, wasn't it? Just a little bit than WoW?
They came out within a couple of months of each other, and I know that there was a lot of discussion at that point. In fact, I've actually had fun going through and archived old forums that I used to frequent, where people would say, "Oh, no, EQ2 is going to destroy WoW. WoW's going to fall on its face." And if you really want to understand how much WoW has evolved, all you have to do is go to the auction house and pull up, use a shield or a weapon from vanilla. Like a Skull Flame shield, which would be a shield that was around in the World of Warcraft vanilla, that was at its time the most epic of shields. I mean, it was something that everyone really wanted.
Right.
And if you look at that, you will see the graphics in that particular model. Compare it to, say, the current PvP or Firelands type, armor or shields. Mm-hmm. They're not even the same. And that Skullflame shield looks a lot like something you would find in EQ. They just haven't progressed. If you look back at old vanilla WoW and EQ2, they look a lot the same. WoW has scaled better. They have taken the time to update their graphics and do the things to keep the game up to speed with a graphics overhaul that you just don't see with EQ2.
Yeah. So I'll give it a shot. I mean, it deserves it, right? There's so many people that love it. I got to give it a fair shake. Still playing Global Agenda, as we were talking about in the pre-show. It's starting to remind me of Tribes now. It's really got the world feel of it. I keep wanting to ski down all the hills. I don't know if you remember that from Tribes, but skiing down there.
Yes.
It doesn't work, by the way. If you try that in Global Agenda, not going to happen.
You just brought back a lot of that's gaming Circa 1999.
Yeah. I remember being at university, and Bill and I were in a Tribes clan, and man, we sucked. It was all Canadian, so of course, pacifists, the lot of us. And it just we tried, and we had matches, right? But it just no, it didn't go well. So that's it's got its hooked into me. I'm starting to figure out why. Last but not least, I've been actually back into Eve with the whole thing with the Incarna debacle, which we'll talk about in a little bit, has gotten me interested in Eve again. And that's one of those games Bill and I always say, oh, we want to play more of. Well, you know what I found works really, really well? I have it on a second screen while I'm writing or while I'm editing or something like that that's taking up the majority of my attention. And then I mine in Eve, and I work on my skills in Eve. I've decided I'm going to become the mine baron of whatever freaking solar system I'm in. And I'm going to mine everything, the crap out of it. And I just got a new ship. I got a new frigate, so I'm kind of excited about that.
Now, Chris, how long have you played Eve since the start of Eve for you?
I was in the beta.
Okay.
And I haven't played since the beta. And I got back into it just a few months ago.
Okay, so a lot of
I'm a
people
newbie.
that would be
Well,
interested
not
in
newbie, but
Eve, a lot of people that would be interested in Eve, if they don't have a friend that plays it and they haven't been close
right.
to it, all that they hear is that it is by far, without any question, the most difficult game to enter late. That
Yep.
it's a harsh world, it's brutal. As someone who has just started the game in the last couple of months, what would you say to people out there that maybe are interested in Eve, that like the idea behind it, but have been scared off by everything they've heard about how brutal it is the minute you log in?
Learn to run away. That's what I because
And love mining.
well, that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm interested in. I want to make a whole bunch of money to buy better ships and to sort of get a big mining barge is my current goal. I have one ship to get in between that, but I have to buy the skill and train the skill, etc., etc. But it's working well for me.
You're not worried about, and I don't know what the SK equivalent, I don't know what a lot would be, but that you would spend a couple of months amassing all this fortune just to have someone that's played this game that basically controls a sector to come in there and just destroy you and take everything you've got. We're not worried about that.
I haven't had it happen yet, but that's because I'm staying in pretty secure space.
So the point is, for people that are coming in, there are points of safety, safe harbors, if you will, where if you want to play the safe game, you can at least get accustomed, get familiar with the game before you have to worry about literally getting space ganked, as I like to call it.
So that's pretty much what we have done in-game this week. Now we're going to take a quick second to talk about our sponsor, Guild Launch. Guild Launch is, in my opinion, the web's best guild site hosting service. Now, I know that Lotro, the Corpathroni, our Lotro Reporter Guild, has had their site on Guild Launch for quite a while, and I know that Rich, you've had your site as well on Guild Launch for quite a while, even before we were sponsored with the network, didn't you?
Yeah, I actually, before I ever became part of the MMO Reporter Network, I did the due diligence as just a guild leader that wanted a website without worrying about a podcast, without worrying about sponsors. There was no bias there, and they had the best package, and so I went with them, and it was just lucky that when we joined the MMO Reporter Network, that Guild Launch was one of the sponsors. But it's a great site. We've been with them, have had zero downtime, lots of great tools, and it's been a pleasure to work with them. The best thing I can say about any hosting provider is that you don't have to mention them because it always just works, and that's exactly what we've experienced with Guild Launch.
Awesome, and that's what's been our experience as well with, like I said, the Lotro Reporter kinship and the Rift Guild that we've got. So if you want to get yourself a guild site that just works, head on over to Guild Launch. You can make a free site just like that. Very, very simple. But if you want to get all the premium features, all the no ads, all the extra stuff that you can get, just use the coupon code MMO Reporter when you make your order, and you can get your first month free. And moving on to the news for this week, we are going to talk a little bit of Eve. We ended with Eve with what we did in game this week, and we're going to start the news with it as well. I was lucky enough earlier today when we recorded to do a little bit of a Skype teleconference with the folks over at CCP, and I'm going to have an article. It's going to be up on PC Gamer. I will have a link in the show notes. I'll put it out on Twitter as well. But it's quite the uproar that's happening within the Eve community on a couple of different points. As far as the uproar goes, there's the oh gosh, why am I forgetting? The Nex is what it's called, the Noble Exchange on one side, and it's very, very expensive monocle. And there's some of the technical issues with the captain's quarters as well, which is sort of the technological upgrade that they've had as well to when you dock at stations, amongst other things. But those seem to be the two biggest things. Now, Rich, sorry, I can't. That's happened more than a few times, hasn't it?
That's okay. I actually had someone leave me a 5-star review that called me Rick, and I'm like, if you were listening, you'd know my name's not Rick. So I guess it happened. So no problem.
Sorry about that. You have heard from some people about some mass departures, haven't you?
Well, yeah, I've just heard that I guess there were some, and again, I don't play Eve, don't play it anymore, but I understand that a lot of people threw up their hands and said, I don't know if it's a protest. I think a lot of these people that left these high-end corporations that left the game did so more as a protest. I think they were high enough in the game that you're probably not going to abandon everything you've got there. But I think they've sent a message, and I believe the folks at CCP got the message.
Yeah, it's I can't go into too much detail because I think I'd get my hand slapped from PC Gamer about going into details about that. But you can find it on PC Gamer, the article. It's basically they called out the Council for Stellar Management, which is a great idea, and I think CCP kind of started this, but in a different way. You've seen, excuse me, you've seen all these sites do. Not sites, games do these fan days lately. It started kind of with Rift a few months ago, and then TOR did one a few months after that, and then Guild Wars 2 recently did a fan day where they call all their fans, fly all their fans, not all their fans, a few of their fans, their, biggest fan sites, etc., to their location, and they can talk about the game, and, they're the evangelists for the game, so they want them to have the first view at the information. It's both a reward and really lots of publicity for them. Well, CCP did it a little bit differently a few years ago. They have their Council for Stellar Management, which is an elected group of players that flies to Iceland every once in a while and, every few months and discusses the game with CCP and has first look at stuff and CCP lessons, etc. Well, they had an emergency meeting of the CSM, the Council for Stellar Management, and they didn't hold the CSM didn't hold any punches, let CCP know exactly what they thought. They came out with a joint statement. And it basically sounds like CCP just should have been a little bit more forthcoming. It's pretty tough. What do you think about a $70 vanity item, Rich? Do you think that's something that you would buy?
Given that I have yet to purchase the Disco Kitty or the Sparkle Pony, as you like to call them in the World of Warcraft, and I have a long-standing mantra that I will not buy a non-combat pet in WoW, I think it's safe to say that no, I would definitely not buy a $70 vanity item.
See, we call it the stupid Star Horse here at MMO Reporter. We have got the official name for it.
I like that.
Yeah, it's SSH. Really stupid Star Horse. It rolls off the tongue,
It does. I think I might switch up from Sparkle Pony to SSH. We'll see.
So I think the biggest thing about any sort of microtransaction transition when you add microtransactions to a game is you kind of got to start with the small stuff.
Yeah, can I stop you there? Because it's definitely not a microtransaction when it's $70. They probably should name it a macro transaction and just call it what it is, because there's nothing micro about $70 in a game that you pay what, $14, $15 a month for.
Right. And it's kind of crazy. I'm definitely not the type to pay any real world money. Even Lord of the Rings Online, which had the free to play transition, I've got a lifetime account, which means I get a stipend of points every month, an allowance, so to speak. And we had a big talk about this. In fact, somebody on Twitter, trying to remember exactly who it was for the TOR Reporter podcast. What was their quote? Oh, this is good, so I'm actually going to look for it here. Right, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing Almazar, that's my game name, that turbine points are not the same as money. Because I don't think of them, because I don't pay money, right? So I don't think of them as real world money.
Well, you're definitely on the right track, because of all of the lifetime subs that have ever been offered in the MMO space, Lotro's the only one that actually was worth the money. And I actually purchased my Hellgate London lifetime subscription. Don't ask me where that got me. And I have a Champions Online lifetime subscription that I don't ever use. The one I didn't get is the one I should have got, which was Lotro. And if I did have that, I'd probably be playing today. So good purchase.
Yeah, So, they started small with their microtransaction stuff. There's the most expensive one was a mount that was $20 if you spent real world money. I did buy that mount, but that's because I had thousands and thousands of turbine points, because they gave bonuses at the transition, and every month you got points, and it just added up. So, yeah. I think you need to start small, not $70.
That's crazy. Matter of fact, I don't know if you might have to do put Google to work to this on this, but I don't know that there's ever been a vanity item in an MMO that was ever as expensive as $70. I think that would be the number one as far as I can recall.
Yeah, and I've got some interesting information in my article that I can't talk about now. Check out the article, but if you think
I
that's the
definitely
case,
will now.
just check it out because you'll be shocked. All right.
Excellent.
Let's move on to the next story here. A global agenda business model is booming, according to a PC Gamer interview. There are a lot of players going into global agenda since the free-to-play transition. This is Hi-Res Studio COO Todd Harris was talking about this in the interview, and in one thing that I really like, he says we now have 5 times as many interested players every day going through the same experience, knowing that it's free-to-play and it's not a demo. 5 times as many players. That's a pretty big number.
And I think what they're trying to do is position themselves as that kind of that action MMO along the lines of Star Siege Tribes, along the lines of Planet Side. And I know that there was a time when free-to-play had become kind of this negative connotation, and I think that they've really started to embrace that. And it looks like they might be one of those go-to models like you think of when you think of what free-to-play did for DDO and what free-to-play certainly did for Lord of the Rings.
And may do for WoW in the future, as we talked about last week.
Apparently.
Yeah. It's definitely the future, I think. Not just for those games that are dying, but for new games as well. And I think that it's a great business model for the companies. Obviously, if they can get their traction going and get a few people in the game, people are willing to spend a little bit of money, right? And they're probably going to spend more when they do spend it. They just might do so infrequently. But that surge of income, and then you'll get the people that will pay way more than $15 a month to get all the stuff that they want in the game.
And it's interesting because when you think of MMOs, the fantasy space has always been the dominant, absolutely dominant, genre. And what you're finding now is if you really take into account that there really hasn't been a good, maybe Tabula Rasa, but there really hasn't been a good non-fantasy MMO outside of perhaps E. But when you get into that, something like Global Agenda and what they're doing, what Hellgate London wanted to do, but you think about the number of players out there that are playing Counter-Strike, that played Planet Side, that play Team Fortress 2. This is the type of game that can appeal to them and give you that level of depth that I think a lot of people miss when they play games like Team Fortress. This is certainly one of those games, and I think they could position themselves as kind of the go-to in that genre if they continue on this track.
Now, one point of contention there, though, are you saying that Anarchy Online wasn't a great, amazing game?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, I agree. I played that as well, beta, and into the first few months of launch, and that was enough. Thank you.
I did too. I played in beta and thought it was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I lasted about 4 months.
Yeah, I don't think I lasted that long. I did my free month. I think I did one more month, and it was like, okay, that's enough pain, enough suffering. Thank you.
Great idea, great concept, but didn't execute
some
right.
great community things that came out of it. The DJs, that was probably one of the first games that had the sort of in-game DJs working like that. I mean, it wasn't all in-game, but it was still a really, really great community once it got going, right?
I remember the mission terminals. Those were the things that I thought were kind of ahead of their time. And, any game that's been out there, you could start at Asheron's Call and work your way back. They've all brought something to the genre. And in retrospect, the mission terminals were no big advancement. But in its time, that's the one thing that I took from it, that it made getting into different leveled instances fairly simple. A very crude and rudimentary form of what we have now, like the looking for group in WoW.
Yeah, it's. I think it's. Yeah, I think Anarchy Online, AO, thank you, goodbye. But Global Agenda, it's here. I think it's going to face some pretty stiff competition coming up, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in the show here. But there's some games that are coming up, Firefall being the big one, that are really going to give it a run for its money.
Firefall looks amazing. It looks like one of those games that could really, like we were just talking about with Global Agenda, it could really be one of those games that sets that genre afire, and could certainly, absolutely give Global Agenda a run for its money.
And let's move right on to that story while we're talking about it. There's a video dev diary on PC Gamers where we found it, and it talks about the story of Firefall, which is actually standard yet different sci-fi fare. So it's not anything that's going to blow you. Whoa! It's not Inception or anything, but it will definitely keep you interested. And they've hired on Orson Scott Card, and I have no idea who that is. I don't know if I should, and I'm probably a bad person. All the geeks out there are going to burn effigies of me for not knowing who he is. But, it's always good when you bring a bigger name writer on for your game, because it gives it lends it an air of authenticity when you're in the game.
I'm totally going off the cuff here, but I'm pretty sure he is a British fantasy writer who's done a couple of different things genre-wise. He's done the traditional sword and sorcery, and he's also done some more modern type of storylines, and definitely well-known author for sure.
Okay, you know what? I totally... first of all, I have to correct you. Sorry, he's American.
He is.
Wikipedia for the win.
Yeah,
Author, critic, public speaker, essayist, columnist, and political advocate. Now, I'm going to say a name that you are probably going to recognize right away once I say it. If you don't listen to enough Twit, because they talk about this book all the time. It's called Ender's Game.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so he is the writer of Ender's Game. So there you go. That
it is the guy I was thinking of. I just had it in my head that he was British, and I do recall, and I'm going to date myself here, but in high school in the late 80s, early 90s, his books had been around, so I'm thinking that he did his stuff it started in maybe the mid 80s, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. So there you go. Some pretty quality stuff that's going to be coming our way in the way of Firefall. It's a cool video if you've had a chance to see it. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It shows you a lot of gameplay as well as the story. And to me, it kind of has a little bit, I don't know if it is cel-shaded, but it's got just a hint of it there. A little bit of Team Fortress 2 kind of look, which I'm a fan of. And it just kind of throws it out there, and it looks really, really good. I am excited to get a chance to play that game.
I saw the trailer, and the only thing I would quantify there is I do absolutely agree with you. I see the cell shading you're talking about, but that might scare a lot of people off that played a game like Champions Online that was really overtly cell shaded. It's not done in that manner. It's still it definitely has really the hallmarks subtle of it, but it is subtle, and it's really attractive. Champions Online was one of those games that was pretty off-putting in that the cell shading was so kind of overt and in your face, very comic book style. Not a lot of people, you either like that or you completely hate it. It's polarizing. Right. Yeah. That's not the case with Firefall. If you check out the video before you pass judgment on it, the trailer I think really does a good job of showing what it looks like, and it is subtle and overall a very attractive looking game.
Yeah. The other, like you were talking about the cell shading, the other thing that kind of throws people off very similarly is kind of the art style for Clone Wars. Star Wars Clone Wars, that sort of very angular look. My wife can't stand it.
That's stylized, as they call
exactly. And TOR is kind of getting that same sort of art style to it. You can see that's, if it's not a copy, which it isn't, it's at least inspired by that art style. And again, that throws my wife off. Selenia is just thrown off because she can't stand that art style. It's something that
a lot of people are talking about that. That is a point of contention with a lot of the Star Wars fans. And if you check out the TOR forums, that is a not insignificant portion of the posts that are on there. There's a lot of a debate going on right now with the art style.
And the thing is, at this point, there's really not much that you can do. So there's not much point in debating it anymore. Either suck it up and live with it, or enjoy it if you like it. Right? And there's valid points on either side. I'm kind of right halfway in the middle. I keep flip-flopping back and forth with TOR. It is amazing. I love it, and then I'm horribly disappointed in it. And that changes by the minute, if not by the second.
You know what? You know what I'd add to that, though? I would say that at the end of the day, gameplay trumps all. I will
Right.
never forget getting into the World of Warcraft and my first response, not having, I did a little bit of beta. I did about a month of beta. I kind of got into beta by accident. Didn't have a huge Warcraft lore background. I played a little bit of the RTS, but certainly had no lore background. I got into the game, and my first reaction was, there is no way I'm playing this game. It is
Yeah.
way too cartoony. I was coming from games that were a lot more visceral and just didn't have that cartoon look. And if you recall, the first year from 2004 around November until late 2005, that was the bulk of all the discussion, is this raging debate with very polarized lines on the cartoony style, as they called it, versus, whether you liked it or disliked it. And that's the
Yeah.
same thing that we're seeing. Maybe not quite the fervor, but that's definitely the same type of discussion or debate that we're having with the older public.
Right. Well, it's the gameplay as well. This definitely, I in the past I would have put this as sort of almost a third gen. If you think of like EQ as generation 1 of MMOs, you think of WoW, EQ2, sort of that as generation 2. You look at things like Rift. Rift is like 2.5. Guild Wars 2 really seems to be pushing towards that third generation. TOR is firmly second generation to me.
Yeah, I will not be careful. I'll be very trepidatious in my comments here, because this could be the bulk of the podcast. I'm a firm believer that we're nowhere near generation 3 yet. That
Really?
there's certainly different. Yeah, there's generation 2.5, 2.2, whatever. You can have different ranges, and I think we're firmly in generation 2. I think TOR is generation 2. Maybe Rift is 2.1, but we're firmly in that. I'm actually working on what I'm calling the Generation 3 Blueprint, as will be one of the future podcast episodes on Horde for Life, where we're going to talk about this, because there's a lot of things that need to happen from a tech perspective, not in the way the game looks, but in the way the game acts and the way that the game interacts with you, that will then push us to Generation 3. If you look at Generation 1, and the things that you would say Asheron's Call, EQ1, and you compare that to what you see in WoW currently, the leap was enormous. And then you look at WoW and you compare that to Rift, or you compare that to TOR, and you could make the argument that those two games released after WoW are mimicking the things that WoW is still doing. To me, that keeps them firmly in Generation 2. We're not at a point yet where we're pushing the envelope.
I think I need to jump on the tangent train here fully now and head right out of town. But I think that while I agree with you that the generation leap to WoW was quite a bit, just like any other game, and this is something that happens ad nauseum in game in Rift, is the comparison between WoW and Rift is just a WoW clone. Well, WoW
True.
was an EverQuest clone with additions, right? Every game, every movie, every book builds on things that came before it and brings
Absolutely.
something new to it. So ignoring that completely, to me, what looks to be that third generation, what puts Rift close to that, and what makes me think Guild Wars 2 may be, is the abandonment of specific classes. There's so much fluidity in what your role can be in Rift, and it seems like there will be even more fluidity in what your character is in Guild Wars 2. That's one big thing. Now, what pushes Guild Wars 2 maybe, and again, I'm putting big air quotes around that, maybe, into that Generation 3, is the revamping of the leveling experience. The way in which, you're still leveling, because people like to do that. I like to be a level something, right? That's something I like. I don't think I'd like a levelless game. But having that revamped leveling, where there's, in Guild Wars 2, apparently, you know what? There's not going to be any quests. It's all going to be these world events that Rift is kind of dipping its toe into. Guild Wars 2 is jumping headfirst into the pool, and hopefully there's water in there.
Absolutely, and I will. My comment to that would be, I first of all, let me say, I think Rift has far and away the best class system ever created in an MMO. It's one of the things that, they often talk about the rifts, the actual physical rifts, is kind of what separates them, because it's vibrant and it's visual and it's something you can kind of put on the front of a box. But it'd be hard to kind of advertise the class system and have any visual impact. But to me, the class system in Rift was just as important, if not more important, than the actual Rift mechanic.
Yeah.
I think, but when I look at what's going to happen in Generation 3, I don't look at the way that you play the game, or the actual the tools that are available to you. In other words, the additional player classes. Even breaking the Holy Trinity, to me, is not necessarily a game changer, though I think that that's something that would certainly be a precursor to a game changing, changing the landscape in Generation 3. What I'm talking about is changing the way the world interacts with you, the way that it makes you play. When you look at Asheron's Call and EQ and WoW and Rift and TOR, you're still doing the same things. Now, TOR will tell you we're going to do it with cinematics, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about how they're going to do some things with that in a little bit. So they're certainly adding some nuances, just like Rift will do with the rifts, just like WoW has done with the looking for group. I get all that. But at Generation 3, you're going to be looking at an actual paradigm shift in the way the game allows you to play the game. One of the things we talked about on a recent podcast was the ability. Right now, there's a big discussion in WoW. Matter of fact, we started with this about the dungeon difficulty. Everyone talks about, oh, it's too easy for this group and not easy enough for this group, and people are complaining. You'll get to a point, and we've covered this on multiple different podcasts, where we've talked about what about setting up some type of a scaling dynamic, so that when you walk into a raid, you don't have to select 10-man or 25-man or normal or heroic. It'll take the same algorithms that WoW or Blizzard are currently using for their arena matchmaking system, and allows you to have a scaled dungeon that says, okay, you're going into you're going into a 12 people. That's fine. We'll allow 12 people to enter. And certainly you'll have a maximum and a minimum, but it will give you much more flexibility in the way that you interact with that dungeon. Conversely, we talked about the invincible boss, having multiple stages of how you will actually kill your end bosses or the different various bosses in a raid, and giving you different stages so that you don't always have to have this either win or fail mentality, but have something in the middle that will, again, give you that kind of rich experience, which is, I think, TOR is trying to do in a different way. Those are the types of things that will lead us to Generation 3. And to me, and I'll leave it at this, the demarcation point of a change in a generation is when the games that follow completely all follow the same pattern of a new way of doing something. When you don't go into a 10 or 25-man raid because there's a new way to do it, when there's a new way to raid, then you're talking about a new generation.
Well, I think that as the tangent train heads back into the station, I'm going to bring things back as I wait on bated breath for that podcast that you said you were going to release about that. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that in detail. Let's get back to what my original TOR comment was supposed to do, which was bring us to the discussion of the TOR Bounty Hunter progression video. It's amazing how that kind of went for a loop now, didn't it? So let's quickly just go over it. It's the second time they're doing a Bounty Hunter progression video. I don't know why they're doing it again. I think that this one is more about the skills and less about the sort of armor progression, which the last one was. But still, we still haven't seen all the different classes with their videos, so why does the Bounty Hunter get two?
Probably because it's the most fleshed out. I think right now they've got the most info and the most visual impact, and I think that it's the best showcase for them right now. And right now they need to get information out. And to me, that's how I read it, but I could obviously be wrong.
Could very well be. I think it's a good video if you're interested in TOR and you want to see about the Bounty Hunter. Go check it out. We'll have a link in the show notes. And
yeah, I know when I watched the trailer, my first thought was, at the same time, Steam had a sale on Knights of the Old Republic from like 2004, 2005. It immediately made me go to Steam and download that $3 game so that I could play it again. So, so it worked.
There you go. And another bit of TOR news, an EA executive on GamesIndustry.biz had an interview. Frank Gibbo, I think, talked about the fact that each class, or there will be 200 hours of gameplay per class in Star Wars: The Old Republic. Now, what do you think about that number, Rich?
Well, you and I talked about this, and I think when you read that out of the as it is, set aside just those words, if you don't caveat that or think about it or qualify that, you might be disappointed. But I know in our pre-show we talked about this, and you actually the idea that you came up with, or the definition that you came up with, is that this would be akin to the vanilla WoW scenario from 1 to 60. In other words, the 200 hours of gameplay per class is just the amount of content that you have on a first pass, which,
Right.
if you look at it in that context, is actually quite impressive. I would probably argue that, for instance, using the WoW example, 1 to 60 did not have 200 hours of gameplay. Now, you could say, well, I played 400 hours from 1 to 60. Yeah, because you maybe were grinding for 200 of those hours on a single mob. So, but they're talking about this game will give you 200 hours of gameplay out of the box for your class without you ever repeating content, and that's
Right.
pretty impressive.
And that's for individual classes. So that's your story for your class, right? For your character.
Right.
Someone, if you decide to roll up another class, you're going to have another 200 hours. Where, again, using the WoW example or even the Rift example, if you roll up a different class, you're not going to have another 200 hours. You're going to have a lot of overlap of content. Right? The
Yeah,
majority
and
of
that was my next question is, like, for instance, WoW has about 10 or so hours of individual gameplay with the starter areas for each of the different classes, and then once you hit a certain level, around 20, you're all kind of doing the same stuff.
Right.
I'd like to get a little more detail on that, because I got to believe that there's some overlap. I would probably argue that, or would certainly believe that there's not as much as you see in current MMOs like Rift or WoW. But I got to believe there's some overlap, that if you're playing a bounty hunter versus another class, you're not going to get 200 hours of brand new, you've never seen before content.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did, because they're pushing story so much.
They are, and if that's the case, I will be immensely impressed.
I don't think that content in the game is going to be TOR's issue at all. I think there will be plenty of things to do. One of the big shifts that I had back into loving the game was when I thought, you know what, this is just gonna be KOTOR with friends. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? So
and if you're a Star Wars fan, the one thing, if you really want Star Wars to succeed, and you want it to be, I hate using the term WoW killer, but if you want it to be that next MMO that can really break into the millions of subscribers, which has not been done to this point outside of Warcraft, the one thing that you have to say, or that you would hang your hat on, would be the fact that this is the first developer outside of Blizzard that has had deep enough pockets to spend the amount of time to do the exact same thing that Blizzard did, like Blizzard has done with every game they've done, including StarCraft and Diablo 3 and World of Warcraft, etc., including Titan, and basically saying, we'll release this when it's done, and really mean it. They could easily launch this game right now. I think you could make the argument that TOR is in as good a state as Warhammer was when it launched, and Warhammer might have been a tremendous game had they had another year or two of development and another $30 or $40 million. They didn't have that. I think EA, who obviously was in bed with Mythic for Warhammer, has seen the error of their ways. BioWare is not going to let them fall down that path, and so they've come to a meeting of the minds, and EA said, fine, we're gonna do whatever it takes. We're gonna give you the same amount of latitude and the obviously the financial wherewithal to do the same thing that Blizzard has done. And I firmly believe that Star Wars: The Old Republic will be the first game that's not called World of Warcraft that's had every ounce of time that they've needed. They've been able to they'll really release it when they truly have nothing left to do, and they won't be rushed in any manner, and it'll be the only game outside of Warcraft that's ever done that.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that'll definitely be the case. All right, so that is the news for this week. We're going to talk really quickly about our other sponsor, Typefrag.com. Typefrag is the web's #1 Ventrilo hosting service. and they have some pretty fantastic servers. I know that the entire MMO Reporter network, including yourself, Rich, is on Typefrag Ventrilo servers. You've made the transition recently with your guild over to a Typefrag server, and what I just like about it is pretty much the uptime. I never have to worry about our Ventrilo server. It's always up.
I also like the interface that they provide you. I'm not going to name our competitor that we've left for Typefrag, but the service was okay. It was spotty at times. It was a little laggy, but the control panel was very kludgy and somewhat outdated. When we came over to Typefrag, I was instantly impressed with not only the uptime and the lack of lag, but the controls and the way they're laid out within Typefrag. The customer service response is great, so been very happy with Typefrag.
Mm-hmm. So if you want to get your own Typefrag Ventrilo server, just head on over to Typefrag, use the coupon code MMO Reporter, and you will get 25% off your first month hosting. And going on to the discussion topic for this week, I actually wanted to talk to Rich about his 30 Days of Diversity project that he has had over on the Horde for Life blog. So, Rich, can you describe it for us and tell us a little bit about it and why you decided to do this?
Sure. I think one of the things that, and I should caveat this or preface this by stating, Rift launched an appearance tab pretty early in Rift, and that obviously was one of the catalysts for us going with 30 Days of Diversity, because while I would maintain that Rift doesn't have, because they're a new game obviously, they don't have the years and years and years of rich history and art style for all of the tiers and all of the gear sets that have been created within the World of Warcraft. The one game that screams for the ability to whatever mechanic, it doesn't have to be an appearance tab, whatever they decide, repurposing the content, whatever, to really showcase all of the immense amount of art and quality art that's in the game that, quite honestly, is either A, obsolete, or B, flat out taken out of the game. So one of the things I noticed before we started this project in the Horde for Life Guild is I would just randomly pull up something out of Atlas Loot and throw it into guild chat, and every time I did that, I'd get someone that said, "Wow, what is that? I've never seen that before. Where do you get that at?" And what I found was that one of the things that you'll see in the World of Warcraft is they've cast a very wide net. They brought a lot of new players in, and a lot of those players only came in Wrath or only came in Cataclysm, and they have no idea of the just incredible amount of gear and armor sets that are available in the game since the start of the game. I mean, WoW is one of those games that's been around long enough that it's got this just incredible catalog of art. And the one thing that I've been disappointed with in Blizzard is that they don't pay the reverence to the art style and to the diversity that is within that game if they were to give you some type of vehicle to showcase that. So the 30 Days of Diversity is a countdown of the top 30, and there are much more than 30. It's becoming quite difficult now as we've hit number 14. But it's been quite difficult to pick out the ones that we like the most, and it's mainly just an opportunity for people to see all these wonderful art assets that are in the game that you'd be shocked at how many people have no idea what they are. They've never seen them before, and so we've showcased those. And what we do is we put a blog post up. We're doing about 2 or 3 a week now. We're down to number 14, and the idea there is to count down from 30 to number 1 of our favorite sets. And like I said, we're currently at number 14. If you want to check it out, it's over at hordeforlife.com. We'd love to get your feedback. I'm sure I'm going to leave. There are literally 100+ sets, not to mention all the weapons. We've got a pretty good response from it, so we're probably going to launch into some type of gear outside of the actual gear, but show some of the weapons and things like that in future blog entries. But right now, we're really covering those tier sets, and they're just amazing. And all I ask is people to go take a look at those and to see and compare that to the sameness that everyone has in the current tier you're in. That's the one problem right now that I see in the World of Warcraft is it's compartmentalized. And I think it's really cannibalizing upon itself. The game is the one game that should not be doing that because it has so much content and so many art assets that they need to showcase those, and we're trying to move that along with the 30 Days of Diversity.
Oh, it's really, really cool. It's kind of interesting how people also, you talked about people people who haven't seen them, but also you mentioned the people who fell in love with this stuff but can't wear it anymore, right? It's interesting how people get attached to virtual gear, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I think we all do. I mean, it's interesting because people will talk about you're just RP nerds. I mean, you can talk to some people that don't care, hardcore PvPers, hardcore raiders. There's many different facets. But what you find is that we all, to a certain degree, are role playing. I mean, you're playing an MMO, you're riding drakes, you're slaying dragons, you're killing elementals. You're role playing, my friend. No matter how cool you think you are, if you're playing the World of Warcraft or Rift or Lotro, you are role playing. And I know that Roltro has a nice appearance tab. I know that Rift has a nice appearance tab. And all we're saying is that if those games have it, how could you not have that in a game that has, in most cases, 6 or 7 times the developers and 6 or 7 times the art assets that the 11 million subscribers and their revenue generate for Blizzard? Why would you not want to showcase all of those different art assets and all of that tremendous diversity? The one problem I have is that when you get to a level, we're just hit tier 12, you're at tier 11, you get all this great gear, and it's a treadmill. And we all know it's a treadmill. Every game, every MMO is a treadmill, but you should at least try to hide it. You should do a better job of putting a veneer on the treadmill so that you don't feel like you're in this constant treadmill of going to the raid, going through all the cataclysm raids, getting your tier 11 gear, and then right when you're about done with it, and by the way, everyone else has the same gear that you have because there is no diversity, that 4.2 launches, and now everybody starts over, and now everybody is driving towards the tier 12 gear, and the tier 12 gear is amazing looking. I don't refute that one bit, but when you're going to have 500 paladins sitting in Orgrimmar or Stormwind all with the same tier 12, it kind of loses its luster. So why not put something in place that will allow you to go back and take a look at the tier 2 paladin set, which most people would regard as the best looking paladin set in the game. And I could give you one. I don't want to give our top 5 away, so I don't want to give them all away yet, but every tier has, or every class has, some amazing sets in them, and everyone has their own taste. And the nice thing about it is if you had the ability to utilize all this different gear, then that would give everyone the ability to express themselves. You do it with the class you pick. You do it with the build that you have. Why wouldn't you do it with the avatar? I mean, when you made your character, did you change hairstyles or did you just select random? I'm sure some of you did select random, but most people didn't. Most people wanted to create the character that best represented whatever they had in their head. And gear is part of that. And so we're hoping with the 30 Days of Diversity that we just bring attention to that, because so many people haven't even been exposed to it. They don't know what's out there. So we're trying to raise a little bit of awareness.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely something that when I got into raiding in WoW, and this would have been Wrath, I got into it really because I liked the look of the gear. That's one of the biggest reasons that I did it. And I'm still the same way in Rift. And although I do have a lot of the equipment that just comes with me, I keep a lot of my stuff as well. And that's one of the things I actually love about Lotro, is they have a whole different bank that you have for your cosmetic items, that you can put them in there and keep them separate. Now, only your cosmetic items can go in there. Once you put it in there, you can never use that item for stats again. They've got a little piece of technology that kind of transforms it into cosmetic only, costume only, so you can't keep it for stats in there. But I can keep stuff as long as I want, and I can spend my wonderful turbine points, which I have tons of, to buy more space in that wardrobe. And I've got all this stuff that I can choose to wear whatever I want, whenever I want. Now I have to go back to a bank to get to it, but yeah.
Now, you're obviously an expert in Lord of the Rings that I'm not. With the wardrobe tab in Lotro, that gives you the ability to, as you advance in levels and acquire new gear with new content, more powerful gear, it allows you to continue to use the stat-based gear so that you're still viable at the end game, but yet have the look that you choose. So, for instance, to use a WoW analogy, if I were to go back to vanilla, one of the vanilla expansions, and I were to grab the tier 2 paladin set, for example, I could then, even though it has stats on it, they're obviously completely obsolete and worthless in today's World of Warcraft's game. If you had a Lotro type mechanic, I would then take that and say, okay, I'm willing to sacrifice this to lose all the stats to make it appearance only, or costume only, and then that basically, for instance, the helm would then appear even though I'm using a helm that is obviously current standard and viable and useful, but have the look of whatever cosmetic item I chose.
Right. You put it into the wardrobe, and that's like think of it like a secondary bank, right? You've got however many slots you've bought, and you keep it in there for as long as you want. And I want to wear this outfit. And they've got some sets and stuff like that you can get as well, just like in WoW. Although nothing, I still think to this day, with all the games that have come out, nothing has the flair of the WoW armor sets. I will give that to Blizzard hands down.
Really, that's what makes it so frustrating, is that, when the appearance tab came to Rift, my initial response was elation. But then I thought, well, it doesn't do me any good in Rift yet. Now, it might in 4 or 5 years, especially the way Trion's churning out content patches, so kudos to them. But right now, it's like all these games like Lotro and like Rift, they have these in place, and yet the one game that screams for it is the World of Warcraft.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for doing your 30 Days of Diversity, because it's giving me a chance to go back and look at some of that old armor sets. I played at Vanilla WoW, I played at launch, but then I had a few years off and came back really, really strong right, I guess, midway through Burning Crusade, and then amazingly strong. Went all the way, right, sort of mid-Burning Crusade, went 1 through 60. Or 70 it would have been, and then once I left for a few months and then came back again and ended up getting into raiding after that. So it's definitely given me some look back at some of the gear that I've seen in the past, and very, very a lot of nostalgia there.
It is. It's fun. It was fun to do. It continues to be fun to do. I noticed when I went back to do research, I found many sets that weren't even in game anymore, that I didn't know weren't in game, and I found others that I was like, wow, I forgot completely about that set. So it's been a lot of fun just to do it, and I hope that the people that read it get something out of it. If nothing else, just take a look, take a stroll down memory lane and see. You can definitely see the demarcation point between different expansions based upon the art style. It's actually kind of cool to take a look at.
It is. It's very, very cool. So thanks, Rich, for that. Before we end things off, just want to do a quick shout out to Katabri on Earthen for giving us an iTunes 5-star review. Much appreciated, Katabri. I mispronounce her name very, very often. She's often in the chat room. So thanks a lot. Rich, you have been a pleasure to have on the show, sir. Thank you very much. You are a scholar and a gentleman.
Hey, I've used that line many times. I'm glad to hear that, and I appreciate being on the podcast. It's always fun. As part of Horde for Life, being part of the MMO network, MMO Reporter network has been tremendous, and we look forward to continuing to be on the network and doing future shows. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Now, Rich, if people want to follow you, they decide, you know what, I'm going to jump this stupid MMO Reporter ship. I'm going to listen to Horde for Life non-stop. That is what I'm going to do intravenously. How would they follow you? How would they contact you? What is some of the different ways in which they can interact with you?
Sure, and the beauty of podcasts is you can listen to many, so definitely don't stop listening to MMO Reporter. But if you want to check out Horde for Life, you can check us out on iTunes, or also stream us directly from hordeforlife.com. You can give me a tweet if you'd like, and follow us at HFL Podcast, or you can email the show at hordeforlifepodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to find out more about our guild, we're also on Facebook. We also do the podcast. We also have podcast and guild information on Facebook, and that's facebook.com/Horde for Life Guild.
Awesome. Very, very cool. Now, if you want to get a hold of us here at MMO Reporter, you want to say to everyone that, to Bill, send him an email, I'll forward it to him, just letting him know that you just want Rich on week after week, or maybe that you miss him and that you cried yourself to sleep this week because you did not get to hear his sweet, sweet voice. You can contact us at mmo.reporter@gmail.com. You can send us a Twitter at twitter.com/MMO_reporter. You can search us on Facebook. Just search for MMO Reporter. And, of course, the site is at MMOreporter.com. And at the top right underneath the menu, you'll see this awesome little graphic. There's this great Great podcast there. It says podcasts, and underneath the first one right there is Horde for Life. You click on that too, and you can head over and see Rich's stuff over on his site as well. So thanks again, Rich, for coming out. It's been a blast.
Been a pleasure.
And thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks for downloading the podcast. Thank you to everyone who listened in the chat room. We really appreciate all of you. We hope that all of you download the podcast again next week and listen to it. But most importantly, we hope to see you in game.